I live in a small coastal town called Barnegat on the shores of New Jersey. It's quiet and peaceful, especially if you can catch a sunset on the bay in the middle of summertime. I always considered this a spiritual place. That's until I found myself on the west coast of Ireland in a small town called Doolin. Growing up in a middle class family in New Jersey, traveling outside of the eastern part of the US was usually not in the plans or in the budget. But still, here I was, at 55, taking my first transatlantic flight to Ireland to celebrate 25 years of marriage. The trip, however, would take on a completely different spiritual meaning. I've always feared flying and have taken many flights before, but for the first time, I felt a certain peace spending 6 hours in the air over the vast Atlantic Ocean. After a very good in flight meal and a few movies later, at 2 a.m., I finally fell asleep. 2 hours later, what I saw, I couldn't believe. The dimly golden lit streetlights of Dublin, Ireland. There were beautiful multicolored landing lights glowing like a tree at Christmas time. It felt warm and embracing. I couldn't believe it. I was in Ireland. Driving in Ireland isn't for the faint of heart. If you're from the US, it's driving on the wrong side of the car, on the wrong side of the road, that's barely wide enough to fit the car you're driving. All while being jet lagged. We made it to our first stop at the Grand Canal Hotel, just a couple streets away from the River Liffey. After 2 hours rest, we very smartly grabbed a cab to our first experience, the Guinness Storehouse. While slightly touristy, it has a certain 90s industrial architectural charm, with multi levels of built in interactivity. We indulged at a private tasting in one of the back rooms. We were quite pissed when we left after more than a full few flights. After another 2 hours rest, we were about to grab a good night's sleep when great friends from Ireland decided to take us out to the only rock club in Dublin, complete with a half-cut built-in van that turned into a bar, Fibber McGee's. These friends have stayed with us in New Jersey 7 years prior, and I was happy to finally get to return the favor and spend time with them. Built in 1592, Trinity College served as a college monastery from the Church of England to train their clergy. This was my first connection to construction that came way before America was even conceived. The pitch in between the buildings was immaculately green and roped off, almost a sacred ground you couldn't disturb. The famous Trinity Library itself was going through a refurbishing after some of the wood on the ceiling had gotten damaged. Each day, they carefully remove books and manuscripts over 1,000 years old. It's the first time in 300 years this was done. It's also the place for the symbol of Ireland, the Brian Boru harp. It all leads into our reason to be there, one of the oldest illustrative biblical references in the world, the Book of Kells. The book is over 680 pages, but there is a special page called the Chi Rho page, named after two large Greek letters that cover the page. It is counted among the most beautiful works of art from the medieval times. Chi and Rho are the first two letters of Christos, the Greek word for Christ. You're not able to take a camera in, but I was able to sneak a quick picture as I left. We left Trinity, returning to the Grand Canal Hotel to begin our 3-hour trip west to the wild Atlantic Way. We stopped at a town in the center of Ireland called Athlone on the bank of the River Shannon. This was the moment we realized we were in Europe. In Athlone is the oldest bar in Ireland and quite possibly the world, Sean's Bar. It's what I always thought a true Irish bar would be like. The owner, Timmy, is amazing. We talked about his amazing whiskey, Sean's whiskey, and the history of the bar. We hugged, shook hands, and said goodbye, but also said we'll be back. From Athlone, we traversed over razor-thin roads that could barely house one car on it, never mind two with oncoming traffic. They build these little berms in the side of the road so you can pull over and let other cars pass. You almost feel like the same road will never end. Then, all of a sudden, over a small hill, the scene changes, as if a curtain had been lifted, and everything you read about and watched and saw on TV about castles and medieval times and coastal towns in Ireland revealed itself in all its splendor. I had to stop, pinch myself. And that was a castle. And those were small cottages spread out all over the coastal hillside. I had dreamt about this very spot before I ever saw it in a picture, and now I'm here, standing on it. We pulled into the gate to the place where we were lodging for 3 nights and began our slow descent down the hill to Russell's cottage. Belonging to the Russells, a famous musical family whose style affected the way Irish folk music is now heard and played not only in Ireland but around the world. Many of the Irish song styles that you hear now come from the Russell brothers. Upon walking in, I felt as if I had lived there for years, like I belonged. Then, a moment I'll never be able to fully describe happened. I walked to the back onto the small yard and patio, overlooking the rest of the hillside leading to the roaring Atlantic Ocean. You're 400 feet in the air, so the waves look small, but are actually quite immense. I had a long sleeve shirt on and it was thin. In the middle of March, you would think, being by the ocean, it would be so cold with a biting wind. But it was absolutely still. You can hear yourself breathe and your heart beating. I felt what was like two warm, embracing arms gathering me in, welcoming me. An absolute godly peace came over me. a peace that only one would hope to achieve when they leave this earth. That day, I became a different person forever. Just a short drive from our cottage was the majestic Cliffs of Moher. Standing about 700 feet from the base, it is probably the most popular tourist attraction in Ireland, which kind of annoyed us after 7 days. Driving and staying in cottages, we were starting to feel like locals. The people of Ireland are amazing. They run personal shuttles to the top of the main overlook for the Cliffs of Moher. As I am still a little weak from my continuing battle with leukemia, they drove us right to the top of O'Brien Tower, the tallest lookout point on the cliffs. The water looks like it's in slow motion when it's hitting the rocks, only because the splash waves are about 30 feet high, and it takes some time for the water to come back down. How big are these cliffs? See those little specks at the top? Yeah, those are people. After the Cliffs of Moher, we went back to the cottage to freshen up for a night out at the local pubs. We had eaten in town at a nice high-end restaurant called Anthony's the night before, but tonight we wanted to get a little less touristy. One way to do that? Go to a session. What's a session? A session is actually a couple of people getting together in a bar, taking down instruments that hang in the bar and start playing classic Irish folk songs. So we headed down our one road to the cliff to get into town to a famous local pub called McGann's. With fresh Guinness and local fare, this is about as close to the full-on local experience as you can get. What was amazing to me were the police and fire patches from all over the world donning the entire bar, mainly from the States, who gave a patch to the bar. On Sunday, we reluctantly packed and headed for our next stop. I remember taking our time as we slowly pulled up the hill and down the dirt road. I wanted to stop and take a picture in my mind. I remember thinking to myself, I have to do everything I can to get back to this place. We arrived in the famous city of Galway just in time to take in a mass at St. Nicholas's Cathedral, who are celebrating their 900th anniversary. By chance, there was a touring choir that happened to be performing in the mass and also a free concert later in the day. Whatever sadness we felt leaving Doolin was suddenly brought to the surface in thanksgiving for everything that we had been given. Galway was a major shipping and trade port. Mostly they are known now as the art capital of Ireland. Many art and music festivals are held there. The streets were very similar to Athlone, very Norwegian influenced in design and style. I remember the river that ran through the town being as black as night. You couldn't see 1 inch underneath the water. There seemed to be a very reserved tone in the city that Sunday morning. We felt it to be a little too touristy, so we shopped for a little bit and left for our next stop, which is a very unmentionable town of Sligo. After leaving Sligo the next morning, we headed to our next experience. We were now crossing into Northern Ireland. We traversed over what I can easily say are some of the most beautiful landscapes I've ever seen. Each stop a postcard, each view immaculate. Green grass and sheep everywhere. This is the Ireland I have always seen in pictures and in YouTube videos. Driving along the countryside was everything I thought it would be. We knew we were getting close to the northern point of Ireland due to the constant coastal weather changes. Upon pulling up to the visitors area, we were blessed with perfect sunshine, as bright as we have seen on the entire trip. We took the shuttle down to the base of the Giant's Causeway, and it was exactly how I pictured it. What I didn't expect was walking through a little vestibule revealing a massive canyon that leads right to the Atlantic Ocean. I couldn't speak. I remembered some of the early Game of Thrones shots and was pointing out the camera positions. To sit there, I was trying to also locate the exact angle that the photographer took when he shot the cover of the Led Zeppelin classic Houses of the Holy. To sit there and be amongst these things that are thousands of years old gives you a remarkable perspective on how small we really are, but how we are all so uniquely connected to all things. After being shuttled back to our car, we headed to our final destination and stay, Ballygally Castle in Northern Ireland. The entire drive was along a coastal route right on the base of the Northern Atlantic. I remember thinking to myself, why isn't the Atlantic as rough in these parts as we have seen in New Jersey every day? While the views were absolutely breathtaking, some of the roads were the tightest we ever experienced in Ireland. We turned the corner around Cushendon Cave, a famous scene in Game of Thrones, and you could see the castle right along the shore of the Northern Atlantic. The actual castle is only one section of the hotel, but the grounds are all original. The colors, the scenery seem to pop right in front of you. Even though the castle has a very tragic tale to it, you felt very comfortable there. The people were kind, proper, and the place was immaculate. There were several props displayed that were used in the filming of Game of Thrones. You could even walk up into the tower and see the actual castle rooms, even the ghost room. We later drove through Belfast in an effort to find my wife's family. But to no avail, the street had been replaced with a current highway. We later experienced the Titanic Museum and also the Game of Thrones studio tour. We then headed back to Dublin to say goodbye to our friends and to a country in our hearts we will forever call our home. But we missed what mattered most, our family. But we knew we would return sooner than later, because that is what the heart requires.